Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been running my own physical therapy clinic for about 6 years now, and honestly, I love what I do. Helping people get back on their feet, literally and figuratively, never gets old. My fiance works when a lawyer at a pretty big firm downtown. She's brilliant at what she does, and I'm constantly amazed by how she handles these complex cases without breaking a sweat. A few months back, we had our engagement party. It was a great night, lots of her colleagues came and we all had a few drinks. I was feeling generous and maybe a bit tipsy, so I mentioned to some of her co-workers that if they ever needed physical therapy, I'd be happy to give them a discount. Just trying to be friendly and supportive of her work family. You know, 4 of them took me up on it and became regular clients. They're all great people, and I genuinely enjoy our sessions. Then, about 2 months ago, one of the senior partners from her firm booked an appointment. Let's just say this guy isn't exactly beloved at the office. My fiance had warned me about him before, but I figured I'd keep an open mind. That lasted about 15 minutes into our first session. This guy was something else. He spent the entire hour talking down to me, questioning my methods, and somehow managing to be both incredibly arrogant and desperately seeking validation at the same time. It was exhausting, but I kept it professional. When he went to pay, he brought up the discount I'd mentioned at the party. I told him with a smile that the discount was only for regular employees, not partners. He didn't look thrilled, but he paid full price and booked another appointment anyway. Over the next few weeks, he came in several more times. Each session was pretty much the same, him being condescending, while simultaneously fishing for compliments. I stayed pleasant because that's my job, but I definitely understood why nobody at the firm liked him. Then 3 weeks ago, he came in for what turned out to be a very interesting appointment. We were making small talk and he asked how my day was going. I explained that one of my therapists had called in sick, so I was covering their clients on top of my own schedule. He said that must be annoying and then asked if my therapist had provided a medical certificate. I told him no and added that I thought requiring medical certificates was a stupid policy because I'd rather have sick employees stay home instead of coming in and spreading their illness around the clinic. He countered by saying he'd been thinking about being more strict with medical certificates at his office because too many people were slacking off and claiming to be sick when they weren't. I just nodded and changed the subject. The guy clearly had trust issues with his employees, which seemed like a him problem. Well, wouldn't you know it? About a week later that conversation, I started feeling awful. Sore throat, congestion, the whole 9 yards. I'd caught whatever bug was going around. I pushed through because I had clients booked, but I definitely wasn't at my best. And of course, I ended up giving it to my fiancée. She tried to tough it out at first, but by Thursday night she was really struggling. Friday she worked from home and over the weekend she just got worse. The congestion turned into vertigo, and she could barely stand without feeling lightheaded. Monday morning she texted her assistant saying she needed to take a sick day. This morning she got an email from her boss, the senior partner, the same guy who'd been coming to see me. He wrote that she'd need to provide a medical certificate for her sick day. My fiancée was confused because they had never enforced that policy before, not in the 5 years she'd been there. She showed me the email, and I immediately knew exactly what was happening. This guy had taken our conversation from 3 weeks ago and decided to implement a strict medical certificate policy, and my fiancée was apparently going to be his first victim. I checked my schedule and saw that he had an appointment booked with me for 2 o'clock that afternoon. Perfect timing. I immediately booked my fiancée an appointment with her doctor for 2 o'clock. Then I sent him a message explaining that I needed to cancel his appointment because my fiancée had to go to the doctor and I needed to drive her there. I added that she had pretty bad vertigo from the cold and shouldn't be driving herself. I told him I'd let him know if anything opened up, but mentioned that I was fully booked for the next 3 weeks. I knew she could probably get an Uber or I could arrange something else, but he didn't need to know that. About 20 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. He'd sent messages to both of us. To my fiancée, he wrote that the medical certificate wouldn't be necessary and told her to feel better. To me, he said he understood about the cancellation and hoped she felt better soon. She asked if he'd really just backed down because I'd canceled his physical therapy appointment. I confirmed that apparently he had. She wondered out loud if she should cancel the doctor's appointment then. I pointed out that there was a late cancellation policy and it would be pretty rude to cancel now. I also added that she really should get checked out anyway, because the vertigo wasn't normal for a regular cold. She smiled and texted back to her boss saying she appreciated his understanding, but she'd already made the doctor's appointment and didn't want to cancel due to their late cancellation policy. Very professional, very polite. The doctor ended up prescribing her something for the vertigo and confirmed she needed a few days to recover. She got her medical certificate, submitted it to Human Resources, and took the rest of the week off to recover. The senior partner messaged me twice more over the following days asking about my availability for appointments. I told him I'd check my schedule and get back to him when I had an opening. I never did get back to him. Funny how quickly someone's tune changes when they suddenly need something from you. My fiancé went back to work the following Monday feeling much better. Nobody at the firm ever heard another word about medical certificates being required for sick days. The policy quietly disappeared when it had appeared. The senior partner still works at the firm, but he's never tried to book another appointment with me. I still see the other 4 colleagues regularly, and they're still great clients. They think the whole situation is hilarious, and we occasionally joke about it during their sessions. My fiancé says the senior partner has been noticeably less pushy about policies since then. Apparently, getting a taste of his own medicine, quite literally, taught him something about implementing rules that affect everyone. I'm just glad my fiancé didn't have to deal with that nonsense becoming a permanent thing at her workplace. And I'm definitely more careful now about who I offer discounts to at parties. I work full-time in an office and honestly have zero skills when it comes to home repairs. I don't even own a toolbox. I tried fixing a leaky faucet once and ended up flooding my bathroom. After that, I learned it was more cost-effective to just pay someone who knew what they were doing. My neighbors were mostly friendly. The woman next door seemed nice enough when we first met. We'd wave at each other when getting the mail or taking out the trash. Nothing too deep but cordial. Everything changed one morning in late December when I was driving to work. The roads looked clear, but there was black ice everywhere. My car hit a patch and I lost control for just a few seconds. Those seconds were enough. I slid right into her mailbox. The impact wasn't terrible, but it definitely cracked the thing. I felt horrible. I knocked on her door immediately and apologized. I gave her all my insurance information and told her to file a claim. She seemed upset but understanding at first. Then she called my insurance company and they told her she'd have to pay upfront and submit receipts for reimbursement. She came back to me saying she didn't have the money to do that right now. I didn't want to leave her hanging, so I offered to buy the mailbox myself and pay my handyman to install it. She seemed relieved and picked out the specific mailbox she wanted online. It was a nicer one and wouldn't arrive until December 29th. She knew about the delay and said that was fine. I also sent my handyman over to fix a leaky sink she'd mentioned as an extra apology. I dropped off homemade bread and some Christmas cookies. I thought we were good. When the mailbox arrived on December 29th, she called me, but I couldn't answer. My daughter had been sick for days, and that morning she'd gotten so much worse. I was at the pediatrician's office trying to get her seen. I used that iPhone feature where you can send a text explaining why you can't answer and told her my daughter was sick and that my handyman would reach out to schedule the installation. He called her that same day and arranged to come on Friday, January 2nd when he got back into town. He'd been visiting family for the holidays. She agreed to that date. By that evening, my daughter's fever had spiked to 103.5 degrees. The pediatrician told us to take her to the emergency room. We spent the next 2 days in the hospital while they ran tests and monitored her breathing. The doctors confirmed it was RSV and said she'd need to stay under observation. I was exhausted and terrified watching my little girl struggle to breathe. Then on December 31st, while I was sitting in that hospital room, she sent me a text message dripping with sarcasm saying I didn't care about fixing what I broke. I was shocked. I immediately texted back explaining that my daughter had ended up in the hospital with RSV and I've been there with her. That's why I couldn't call back personally, but my handyman had reached out like I said he would, and they'd confirmed Friday. She responded saying, out of respect, I should have called her myself, that I should be ashamed of myself and be more apologetic. I'd already had 2 separate phone calls with her where I apologized for 30 minutes straight. The first call had been right after the accident where I explained everything and apologized repeatedly. The second call had been a few days later when she called to discuss the mailbox options and I apologized again for the inconvenience. I'd sent my handyman to fix her sink for free, which cost me $75. I brought her baked goods that took me 3 hours to make. What more did she want? I texted back saying I was doing my best and that my daughter was in the hospital, but I'd made sure she had a confirmed date for the repair. She sent another text saying I was the homeowner who plowed over her mailbox and that I was completely disrespectful and sinful. She said I should be ashamed and embarrassed and apologetic. Then she called me pathetic for having my handyman contact her instead of doing it myself. I've been bending over backwards to make this right and she was calling me pathetic while my child was in the hospital. Her mailbox wasn't even that damaged. She was still getting her mail just fine. It just had a crack in it. The mailbox she picked out cost $120 and my handyman was going to charge me another $80 to install it. I was about to spend $200 out of my own pocket to fix something my insurance should have covered just to be a good neighbor. I texted her back saying I was returning the mailbox and she could go through insurance. I reminded her that I didn't have to buy it and pay to install it in the first place. My handyman had told her he'd be there Friday and I'd confirmed the same thing. I said that obviously wasn't good enough, so she should just go through insurance. Then I blocked her number. I called my handyman and told him to cancel. He understood completely and told me he'd had a bad feeling about the whole situation anyway. I returned the mailbox to the store the next day and got my $120 back. A few days later, someone suggested I check with my insurance company to see if she'd actually filed a claim. Turns out she had. Weeks ago, she'd told them she'd be submitting receipts for reimbursement. My handyman called and asked if he could buy the mailbox from me since it was a nice one and he didn't want me to have to deal with returning it. I told him I'd already returned it, but he could have gotten it for free anyway after dealing with her canceling on him. While we were talking, he mentioned something interesting. She'd contacted him on December 30th asking for copies of all the receipts even though I was paying him directly out of pocket. She wanted an itemized breakdown of the mailbox cost and labor. She was planning to submit those receipts to insurance and get reimbursement for work I was already paying for. She was literally trying to scam the insurance company. I called my insurance company back and explained the entire situation. I told them I'd offered to pay for everything myself to avoid going through insurance, but she'd been abusive and demanding. I also mentioned that she'd asked my handyman for receipts even though I was paying him directly. The claims adjuster thanked me for the information and said they'd handle it from there. She also noted in the file that the neighbor had been uncooperative and appeared to be attempting fraud. I'd already opened the claim anyway because my car got damaged in the accident. The front bumper had a dent and the alignment was off. The repair estimate was $850, so I had to pay my $500 deductible regardless. This wasn't going to cost me anything extra, and I had accident forgiveness on my policy. 2 weeks later, I saw a basic mailbox installed at her house, the cheapest one possible. Not the fancy $120 model she'd picked out. This one looked like it cost maybe $30 at most. I later found out from another neighbor that the insurance company had approved the claim but only reimbursed her for a standard replacement mailbox. Since she never paid anything up front, she got exactly what the insurance deemed reasonable. She glares at me whenever she sees me now, but I just smile and wave. One less neighbor I have to pretend to be friends with. My daughter recovered fully from RSV after spending 4 days in the hospital. The whole ordeal cost us $2,300, and medical bills even with insurance. But she is healthy now and that's all that matters. I've been doing security work at Riverside Shopping Center for a while now. Most days are routine. Shoplifters, lost kids finding their parents, making sure the parking lot stays secure. Then, it was around 4 in the afternoon when I spotted a little girl standing alone near the south entrance of the parking lot. She was maybe 10 or 11 years old. Pink hoodie, jeans, and even from far away I could see her shoulders shaking. At first, I figured she got separated from her mom while loading groceries. Happens constantly. But the way she stood there, completely still except for the crying, made me walk faster. When I got closer, I heard her sobbing. Not frustrated crying over not getting what she wanted, but real distress. I walked up and asked if she was okay and whether she was lost. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes and shook her head. The kid was terrified. I told her it was okay and that I worked security there. I asked her to tell me what happened and where her mom was. She tried to speak, but the words got stuck in more sobs. I crouched down to her level and kept my voice calm. I told her to take her time and that she was safe now. A few minutes passed before she calmed down enough to talk. What she told me made my blood run cold. She explained that her mom had left her there and driven away. I asked what she meant and whether her mom was coming back. She said no. Her mom told her she was leaving her there to teach her a lesson. She said her mom wanted her to learn to listen. My stomach dropped. I asked why her mom would do that and what had happened. The girl wiped her eyes with her sleeve and looked down at her shoes. She told me her mom had told her to go into the store and put beer bottles under her hoodie. Her mom wanted her to steal them and bring them to the car. She told her mom no because she didn't want to do it. Her mom got really mad. I asked her to confirm that her mom wanted her to steal. She nodded and explained that her mom said the worst thing that could happen was they'd let her go because she was just a kid. But she didn't want to do it. She kept saying no and her mom kept yelling at her in the car. Then her mom told her to get out and drove away. This woman had tried to use her own daughter to shoplift alcohol, and when the kid refused, she abandoned her in a parking lot as punishment. I told the girl she did the right thing by saying no. I made sure she understood she hadn't done anything wrong. I explained that her mom shouldn't have asked her to do that and definitely shouldn't have left her there. She asked if her mom was coming back. I told her I didn't know but that we were going to figure it out. I said I was calling the police and they would help us. She nodded and I got on my radio to contact my supervisor while pulling out my phone. I called 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. They told me to stay with the girl and that officers were on their way. While we waited, I took her inside to our security office where it was warmer. I got her a bottle of water and some crackers from the vending machine. She sat there quietly, still sniffling but not crying as hard. I asked her what her name was. She told me her first name and I wrote it down with a description of what had happened. About 15 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. They were kind to her, asking gentle questions and taking detailed notes. She repeated everything she'd told me about her mom telling her to steal the beer and then abandoning her when she refused. One of the officers asked if she knew her mom's phone number or where she lived. The girl gave them her address and her mom's cell phone number. One officer stepped away to make some calls while the other stayed with us. The officer who remained told her she was very brave for telling us what happened. He said she did exactly the right thing. Within about 40 minutes, they tracked down the mom. She'd driven home and was just sitting there like nothing had happened. When they confronted her, she tried to claim she was just teaching her daughter a lesson about respect and that she was planning to come back for her eventually. The officers didn't buy it. They arrested her right there. One of the officers came back to the security office to give me an update. He told me they had her in custody and were charging her with child endangerment, contributing to the delinquency of a minor for trying to get her daughter to steal, and abandonment. He said Child Protective Services was being contacted. I asked what was going to happen to the girl. He explained that Child Protective Services would find a safe placement for her tonight, probably with a family member if there was someone appropriate, otherwise a foster home temporarily. But she wouldn't be going back to that woman tonight. The girl was sitting nearby and heard this. She looked scared but also relieved. Before they left, I knelt down next to her one more time. I told her I knew this was scary, but that the people who were going to take care of her tonight were good people. I said they would keep her safe. I reminded her how brave she'd been today and told her to remember that. She gave me a small nod and then surprised me by giving me a quick hug before leaving with the officers. I watched them walk out and felt anger and sadness. What kind of mother tries to turn her own child into a thief and then punishes her for having a conscience? I filed my incident report and went back to my regular patrol, but I kept thinking about that little girl. A few days later, I followed up with the police department. They told me the mom was facing multiple charges and the daughter was placed with her grandmother who lived 2 towns over. The grandmother had been trying to get custody for a while because she suspected neglect. This incident gave her the evidence she needed. The mom ended up pleading guilty to avoid trial. She got 18 months in jail, 5 years probation, and lost all parental rights. The grandmother got full custody. I never understood why she hated me. We weren't even in the same grade, but somehow I became her target. It started sophomore year when we ended up in a few classes together and both joined the marching band. One day she was fine. The next day she decided I was her enemy. I racked my brain trying to figure out what I did wrong. Did I accidentally bump into her in the hallway? Say something she took the wrong way? I had no clue, but suddenly everything I did annoyed her. The thing is, she was smart about it. Nothing she did was obvious enough for teachers to notice or for me to complain about without sounding petty. During band practice, she'd position herself right behind me with her trumpet. Then she'd blast a note directly into my ear. She'd apologize profusely, claiming she didn't realize I was right there. Every single time she'd play innocent, but it happened way too often to be accidental. She'd move my music flip folder when I wasn't looking. I'd sit down for pep band, basketball games, open it up, and my sheet music would be out of order or missing entirely. Or she'd reach over during a performance and flip the pages on me right in the middle of a song. She'd act shocked and say she thought I was further along in the music. I'd have to scramble to find my place while trying not to miss too many notes. She'd talk over me constantly in class discussions. I'd start answering a question and she'd just start talking louder until I gave up. The teacher never seemed to notice or care. The constant one-upmanship was exhausting. Everything became a competition I never agreed to enter. I'd mentioned getting an A on a history exam. She'd announce that she got an A+ on her chemistry test and make sure everyone knew it was way harder than any history test. I bought a new album from my favorite band. She'd brag that she got it last week and had already listened to it about 10 times. I wore my favorite jeans to school one day. She'd make a comment about how they were cute but not really the good brand like the expensive ones she was wearing. She'd look down at her jeans and then back at mine with this little smirk. It was constant and exhausting. I couldn't share anything without her making it a competition and making sure everyone knew she won. My friends noticed, but what could anyone do? She never crossed a line big enough to get in trouble. She was just persistently, annoyingly mean, in ways that seemed small individually, but added up over months. It wore me down. I started keeping quiet about good things that happened because I didn't want to deal with her response. Got a good grade? Didn't mention it. Excited about something? Kept it to myself. She managed to make me feel bad about anything positive in my life. By senior year, I just avoided her when I could. I counted down the days until graduation. I got accepted to a university just across the state border and planned to join their marching band. The day I graduated high school felt like freedom. I packed up, moved into my dorm, and threw myself into college life. The marching band at my university was incredible. We had around 250 members when I started. It was massive compared to our high school band that barely scraped together 50 people. The energy, the skill level, the performances, everything was on a completely different scale. I made new friends, learned new music, traveled to perform at huge events. I never thought about her again. She became a weird, unpleasant memory from high school that I left behind. 2 summers later, I came home for our town's summer celebration. It was the usual small town festival with food stands, live music, and everyone you ever knew showing up. I was hanging out with some high school friends near the bandstand, catching up and laughing. Then I saw her walking toward us. My stomach dropped. She had that same smug expression she always wore when she was about to try to make me feel small. She greeted me and mentioned that she'd heard I joined the marching band at my university. She said it like she was about to deliver a punchline. Then she asked if it could really be all that big of a program. There it was, the same old game, and I told her we had about 250 members when I started, and we were up to around 330 this year. I watched her face twitch. That clearly wasn't the answer she expected. Our high school band had been tiny, and she probably assumed my college band would be similar. But she recovered quickly. She told me she was in her college's marching band too, and they'd just gotten invited to perform at halftime for an NFL game. She made sure to emphasize what a big deal it was. She crossed her arms and waited for me to be impressed. I knew the college she went to. It was only about an hour from mine. Their band was decent, but definitely smaller than ours. I told her that sounded cool and that it would be really fun. Then I mentioned that we did a halftime show for another NFL team my first year, and it was a blast. Her smile faltered a bit. I added that we were offered another NFL game this year too, but we had to turn it down because we were selected to march in a huge national event instead. I explained that the schedule just didn't work out for both. I wasn't trying to one-up her, I was just being honest. But I watched the realization hit her face. For once, she couldn't win the competition she started. She couldn't claim her experience was bigger or better because mine was. She stammered a bit and said that was great, but her voice had lost all its smugness. Then she said she just remembered she needed to go find someone and excused herself. She turned and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there for a second, processing what just happened. My friend next to me started laughing. He asked if that was the girl who used to mess with me in high school. I confirmed it was. He said what just happened was beautiful. I never saw her again after that. No more competitions. No more trying to make me feel less than. She just stopped. Maybe she finally realized I wasn't playing her game anymore. Or maybe she realized she couldn't win it. Either way, I was free of her passive-aggressive nonsense for good. I graduated college and walked straight into this company when the team was actually functional. Back then, we had enough people to handle the workload. Over the years, I watched everyone disappear one by one. Some found better opportunities, and others got cut during layoffs. Eventually, I became the last person standing who actually understood how anything worked. I knew every system inside and out, every process, every shortcut, every weird quirk that made our infrastructure tick. When something broke at 2 in the morning, I was the one they called. When someone needed the file from 4 years ago, they came to me. I became essential without even trying. 8 months ago, the company decided to reorganize everything. Management brought in expensive consultants who'd never touched our systems and let them redesign our entire workflow. I tried warning them in meetings. I sent detailed emails explaining exactly what would go wrong. I told them we were building a disaster. Nobody cared. My manager would smile and nod when I brought up concerns, then ignore everything I said. The executives were too busy congratulating themselves on their brilliant innovation. The team fell apart after that. Everyone was drowning in work, communication broke down completely, and I ended up covering for 3 empty positions. I was the only one who understood how all the pieces connected. 6 months ago, I started looking for a way out. I updated my resume, called everyone I knew in the industry, and started taking interviews. It took some time, but eventually one of our competitors made me an offer. Better salary, better position, actual work-life balance. I accepted before they could change their minds. When I told my manager I was leaving, he looked like I'd slapped him. He said I couldn't leave because I was holding the whole team together. I reminded him I'd been complaining about being miserable for months, and this shouldn't shock him. He scrambled to offer me more money and asked what it would take to make me stay. I explained it wasn't about the paycheck. I needed to be heard and valued, and he'd had half a year to figure that out. He didn't know what to say after that. News traveled fast once people found out I'd given notice. Suddenly, everyone needed to talk to me. The same people who'd brushed off my warnings were losing their minds. They started booking meetings left and right to extract everything I knew. The infrastructure team called the first meeting. They wanted to understand our backup systems. I walked them through the entire setup I'd built over the years. One guy seemed totally lost and asked if we really ran 3 separate backup protocols at once. I confirmed we did because 2 years ago, when I suggested combining them, nobody would approve the budget. Someone else asked how they'd know which protocol to use during an emergency. I told them about the decision tree I'd created and stored in the shared drive that I've been mentioning for 12 months straight. They all stared at their screens like I'd just spoken a foreign language. The second meeting focused on vendor relationships. I manage contracts with roughly 15 different companies. My manager asked me to send over a list of vendors and their contact details. I reminded him I'd already sent that exact list last April and nobody bothered opening it. He asked if I could send it again. I agreed but warned him 3 of those contracts needed renewal next month, and I was the only one who knew the negotiation history. He asked what I meant. I explained I've been handling renewals solo for 5 years because everyone else avoided that work. I wished them luck figuring it out. The color drained from their faces. Meeting 3 covered our customer database. I built custom queries and reports that half the company depended on daily. The team lead said they needed comprehensive documentation of everything I knew about the database. I told them I'd already documented everything in the wiki I created a 1.5 years ago. They pushed back and said they needed more detail. I pointed out the wiki contains screenshots, step-by-step walkthroughs, and troubleshooting guides. I asked what else they possibly wanted. They insisted I needed to demonstrate everything in person, so I spent an hour showing them information they could have read themselves. They scribbled notes frantically, but I could see the confusion on their faces. Someone asked me to repeat something I'd just finished explaining. Another person asked a question that was answered in the very first paragraph of my documentation. By my final week, the panic had fully set in. They called an emergency meeting with everyone on the team. The director showed up looking more stressed than I'd ever seen him. He said they needed to secure all my knowledge before I walked out the door. I told him everything was ready and all my documentation was current and available. He asked what would happen if they had questions after I left. I said they'd need to solve problems themselves, just like I've been doing for years. The team lead, who dismissed every concern I'd raised, spoke up. He admitted this was way more complicated than anyone realized. He said they were screwed. I started laughing. I couldn't stop myself. I reminded him he'd refused to listen 6 months earlier when I tried explaining this exact scenario. The entire room went quiet. Nobody had a response. The director cleared his throat and asked if I consider staying on as a paid consultant. I said no and told him I was finished with this place. The team lead said they desperately needed me. I explained they'd needed me 6 months ago when I was trying to help improve things. Now they needed me because they were desperate. Those were 2 completely different situations. I left that meeting feeling like a weight had lifted off my shoulders. My last day arrived and passed without ceremony. I returned my laptop and security badge. Nobody organized a farewell party. Nobody seemed to know how to act around me. The following Monday, I started at my new company. A week later, my old co-worker sent me a text saying everything was falling apart. He told me half the systems were offline and nobody could fix anything. I replied that it sounded unfortunate. He asked if I could spare a few hours to help them out. I said no because I didn't work there anymore. Word got back to me that they'd hired 2 full people to replace me. From what I heard, they were still struggling to keep things running smoothly. My old manager sent me a connection request on a professional networking site. I left it sitting in my inbox. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.